So one way we seek personal holiness is by taking radical steps to oppose sin in our lives. We take radical steps to oppose sin in our lives. Van, please read Matthew 5, verses 28 and 29.
But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell.
And I think what Jesus was doing was confronting this belief that if you didn't literally physically have sex with a woman, that somehow you could be morally clean. And what Jesus was saying is that if you lust after a woman or lust after a man with sexual intent and you're fulfilled in those desires and those ideations, Jesus is saying we've already committed adultery in our hearts. Then what he goes on to say is that if our right eye causes us to sin, we should gouge it out. And if our right hand, verse 30, causes us to sin, we should cut it off. And I don't think he's saying literally we should gouge out our eyes or cut off our hands, because a person can still lust with one eye and one hand. But I think what Jesus is saying is we need to deal radically with the sin that is in our lives. So Van, what's an example of how you have radically cut out and protected yourself from sin?
Okay, so as Christians, we are called to love non-Christians. Our first response should never be to push people away, but I have found myself in situations where I had to end relationships. And the one situation I'm thinking of specifically was actually within a church. I was fresh out of prison and I wanted to get involved, and this person took me under their wing and was getting me involved, and yet that relationship started to grow and to become unhealthy and in some ways even sinful. And so not only did I have to end the relationship, but I took the radical step of leaving the church completely and moving on.
Yeah, and leaving a church can be a difficult decision, and it's not something we should do quickly, but sometimes we do need to take that radical step to get to a place where we can pursue personal holiness. Van, I'll tell a story about a dear friend of mine, and he has a practice in his life that many people would think is radical. He doesn't have a smartphone. He just has an old flip phone, and it's not because he can't afford the technology or the technology hasn't been around for a while, but he doesn't want internet access on his phone. In fact, he doesn't want internet access in his house. Why? Because he believes that so much of what is on the internet and what is accessible through TV and other means is just displeasing to God and a big temptation to him. So he takes the radical step of saying, I don't want to be anywhere near that temptation. Now, some people would say that's absolutely crazy to not have internet access, but this is a man who has devoted his life to pursuing personal holiness and to pleasing God. So while some people might look at him and think he's crazy, I see somebody who is, figuratively speaking, cutting out his eye, cutting off his hand, doing something that's totally radical, all so that he can be the holy man God wants him to be.